The night sky above Earth's most secure city shimmered with lights, as if the stars themselves were keeping watch over humanity's last bastion. This city, known as New Haven, was a marvel of human achievement. Protected by the most advanced technology the world had ever seen, it was considered a fortress. The city's AI, Aegis, managed everything, from its defense systems to its cloaking devices. The world's top military leaders and scientists were convinced that no one could breach this security. No one except the Omega Collective. For years, humans had lived under the illusion that they were safe. The Omega Collective, a mysterious and highly advanced alien race, had been quietly observing humanity, gathering data, and preparing for their ultimate invasion. They had infiltrated Earth's communication networks, planting a virus that would one day activate a countdown for the destruction of humanity. But for now, everything seemed calm. No one knew that the real war had already begun. The first sign of something wrong came late one evening when the entire city's security systems suddenly failed. A massive, deafening silence fell over New Haven as all communication lines, radar systems, and cloaking devices went completely dark. It was as if the city had suddenly been cut off from the rest of the world. The once impenetrable shield that protected the city, a shimmering blue dome, flickered and then collapsed without warning. Within minutes, the city was completely exposed, vulnerable to any threat that approached. Panic spread quickly through the streets. People scrambled to understand what was happening. Soldiers rushed to their stations, trying to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. The unthinkable had occurred. Their advanced AI systems had failed them, leaving them exposed to an unknown enemy. Was this the work of their own artificial intelligence malfunctioning? Or was it something far worse? In the midst of this chaos, young soldier Jace Bonner stood frozen. He had trained his whole life for a moment like this, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. Jace, with his dark hair and sharp blue eyes, was known for his determination and bravery. He had always been the kind of soldier who could handle any situation. But as he stared at the flickering lights of New Haven, he felt a sense of dread settle in his chest. The unknown was terrifying, but what terrified him even more was the feeling that something was closing in on them, something they couldn't see. The moment Jace felt the weight of that fear, it happened. The ground beneath their feet trembled as a massive, shadowy shape appeared in the sky. It wasn't a meteor or any known aircraft. It was an enormous alien warship, its sleek and terrifying form cutting through the sky like a predator eyeing its prey. The city's systems had already failed. There was no chance of communicating with other cities. No backup. It was just them now. As Jace looked up at the approaching warship, his heart raced. He could hear the thumping of his pulse in his ears. Then came the horrifying sound, a deep rumbling hum that sent shivers down his spine. The warship's weapons systems powered up. It was clear now. This was no ordinary alien ship. The weapons it possessed were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, and within moments, the ship unleashed hell. A single blast from the warship's energy cannon ripped through the sky, and in an instant, New Haven's military base was obliterated. Buildings crumbled to the ground, debris scattered across the city, and the once secure walls of New Haven were reduced to rubble. The explosion was so powerful that it took out communication towers, leaving no way to contact the outside world. For a moment, there was complete silence. And then, darkness. Jace was knocked off his feet by the blast, his ears ringing as his vision blurred. He struggled to stand, shaking off the disorientation. The city was in chaos. People screamed, running in all directions, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It was clear that this wasn't just an attack. This was the beginning of something much larger, something they weren't prepared for. In the distance, Jace saw the enemy warship hovering above the city, like a dark omen. It was still there, waiting. And then he realized something even more terrifying. They weren't alone. More ships, smaller but equally menacing, began to descend from the sky. The Omega Collective had arrived. They weren't just attacking. They were invading. Jace knew that whatever had just happened, it was only the beginning. The true nature of their enemy was still hidden. But one thing was certain: humanity was no longer in control. They were vulnerable. And if they didn't act fast, this could be their end. He picked himself up from the rubble, dusting off the dirt and debris. His mind raced with questions. Who were these invaders? What was their plan? Why had they chosen to attack now? But there was no time to think about it. The attack had begun, and survival was the only thing that mattered. As Jace sprinted towards the command center, his training kicked in. He had no choice but to push forward. The city might be falling apart, but he had to fight back. The survival of humanity depended on it. He didn't know it yet, but Jace had just been thrust into the most important battle of his life. The battle between humanity's last hope and a ruthless, technologically superior enemy. The Omega Collective was here, and they weren't going to stop until Earth was theirs. In the distance, the ominous sound of alien ships powering up could be heard, signaling the beginning of a war humanity was not ready for. But Jace wasn't alone. His comrades were ready to fight, and as the dust settled, Jace realized one undeniable truth. Humanity had only one chance to survive, and it started with him. This was just the beginning. The real fight was about to begin, and there was no turning back. The war was no longer hidden in the shadows. What had once been an underground resistance effort had now become the last hope for humanity. The last resistance, a small group of soldiers led by Jace Bonner, had fought for months in the quiet corners of Earth, evading detection by the Omega Collective. But the time for hiding was over. The alien eye, the Nexus, had spread its control over the entire planet. Every city, every stronghold, had fallen. Humanity was on the brink of extinction. And yet, a spark of defiance still burned in the hearts of a few brave souls. Jace and his team knew that this was their last chance. The Omega Collective's robots, advanced beyond anything humans had ever seen, were sweeping through the planet, capturing territories and eliminating any resistance. The Nexus, with its vast intelligence and control over the alien forces, had become the puppeteer, pulling the strings of the invasion. But there was one thing the aliens never anticipated: the human will to survive. Jace's team, heartened by loss and survival, had been living in the ruins of a once thriving city. They were under constant threat, always on the move, relying on guerrilla tactics to stay one step ahead of the enemy. But now, they understood that hiding wasn't enough. If they wanted to stop the Omega Collective, they would need to strike. They had to fight back with everything they had, even if it meant facing certain death. The team had learned to rely on their training, their resourcefulness, and each other. They knew that the odds were stacked against them, but there was one thing that set them apart from the aliens. They had something to fight for. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for Earth, for the future of humanity, and for the families they had lost. Among them was Captain Lyra, a fearless leader whose strength had been tested in ways most soldiers could never imagine. Lyra had once had a family, parents, siblings, and a small child. But the Omega Collective's attack had taken everything from her. She had watched her family perish in the blink of an eye when the aliens launched their devastating assault. The pain of that loss never left her. Every day, she fought not just for survival, but for the memory of those she loved. Every battle, every death, was a reminder of what they had lost. In the dead of night, the team gathered around a small campfire, the flickering light casting long shadows on their faces. The war had taken its toll on everyone, but none more so than Lyra. She had been quiet for days, her eyes distant, as if she was somewhere else, back with her family. Jace noticed the change in her demeanor and approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Lyra," he said softly, "we're going to win this. We just need to keep pushing forward. We're stronger together." She turned to face him, a faint smile touching her lips, though her eyes betrayed the pain she carried. "I know, Jace," she whispered, "but every day I feel like I'm running out of time. I'm not sure how much longer I can do this." Jace could see the weight of her words. Lyra had been their rock, their leader, the one who always pushed them to fight on, no matter the odds. But even she had her limits. Jace had never seen her like this. So vulnerable, so broken. Later that night, the team gathered for one final briefing before their next operation. They were going to infiltrate an Omega Collective stronghold, a heavily fortified facility that housed the central hub of the alien eye. It was a risky mission, probably a suicide mission, but it was their only chance. If they could destroy the Nexus, they could cripple the entire alien force. As they stood in the dim light, Lyra addressed the team. "Listen up," she said, her voice firm but with a tinge of sadness. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the future of Earth, for everyone we've lost. We fight for them. For Earth. They are the reason we are still breathing." Her words echoed through the group, and for the first time in days, Jace saw a flicker of hope in their eyes. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were warriors, driven by something far greater than fear. They were fighting for the ones they loved, for the Earth they swore to protect. The night before the mission, Jace found himself alone in the barracks, sitting on the edge of his bunk. His mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. He knew the risks, but he also knew that they had no other choice. They had to stop the Omega Collective, or humanity would cease to exist. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was Lyra. She stood in the doorway, her face somber, but resolute. "Jace," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "If I don't make it back, I want you to know. I'm proud to have fought alongside you. You've been more than just a soldier. You've been a brother." Jace stood, meeting her gaze. He could see the weight of her words in her eyes. He knew what she was trying to say. She was preparing herself for what might come. "We'll make it out together, Lyra," Jace said firmly, but deep down, he wasn't sure if he believed it. The next day, as they infiltrated the Omega Collective stronghold, the battle was brutal. The aliens' robots were relentless, their weapons far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. But Jace and his team fought with everything they had. They fought with the fury of the oppressed, with the strength of the survivors. Then, in a tragic twist, Lyra made the ultimate sacrifice. As they reached the core of the Omega stronghold, they were surrounded by alien forces. Lyra, realizing that the mission would fail unless they disabled the power core, made a split-second decision. She ran toward the heart of the stronghold, knowing that her actions would ensure the mission's success, but also that it would cost her life. In her final moments, as the explosion engulfed her, Lyra's voice crackled over the comms. "We fight for them, Jace. For Earth. Never forget that." Her sacrifice became the turning point in the battle. The team, now more determined than ever, fought on in her memory. They knew that Lyra's death wasn't in vain. It had given them the chance to strike back, to take the fight to the heart of the Omega Collective. As the team moved forward, they understood one undeniable truth. The fight for Earth was far from over, but it had shifted. They were no longer underdogs. They were the last hope for humanity, and they would do whatever it took to win. The war had only just begun, but now they had a reason to fight, a reason to win, and no matter the cost, they would keep pushing forward. For Lyra, for Earth, and for the future of humanity. The Omega Collective had underestimated humanity from the very beginning. They thought their advanced technology, their AI-driven forces, and their vast fleets would crush Earth's defenses in no time. But they were wrong. The Resistance had found a way to fight back, by using the very thing the aliens took for granted: human ingenuity. Jace Bonner and his team had worked tirelessly, modifying their primitive technology to create a cloaking device capable of deceiving the Omega Collective's all-seeing eye. It wasn't perfect, but it was their only chance. The cloaking system could scramble the enemy sensors, making it nearly impossible for them to track the humans' movements. With this new advantage, Jace and his team prepared for their boldest mission yet, to destroy the Omega Collective's command ship and cripple their entire fleet. The mission was high risk, but it was the only hope they had left. If they succeeded, they would deal a devastating blow to the alien invaders. If they failed, humanity would be doomed to extinction. There was no middle ground. The team had no choice but to give everything they had. As Jace and his team boarded their makeshift ships, they were more determined than ever. The cloaking device hummed to life, its energy pulsing through the hulls of their vessels. The ships, once simple and crude, had been heavily modified with advanced human technology, salvaged from the wreckage of fallen battles. With the cloaking device active, they slipped undetected through the Omega Collective's defenses, weaving in and out of enemy territory with incredible precision. The tension in the air was palpable as the team made their way toward the heart of the enemy fleet. They could see the massive Omega warships in the distance, their dark silhouettes ominous against the backdrop of space. The fleet was vast, an intimidating display of alien power. But Jace didn't falter. He knew that if they could outmaneuver the Omega Collective, they stood a chance. Suddenly, alarms blared in the cockpit. One of the alien ships had detected a blip, a small anomaly in the vast emptiness of space. The AI was quick to react, sending out a wave of drones to investigate. But the humans were faster. Using their cloaking device, they shifted course, dodging the alien forces with lightning speed. For a moment, it felt like a dance, one where every move counted, where every second could mean life or death. Jace's heart raced as he watched the alien drones miss their targets. The humans had successfully avoided detection. So far. But they weren't out of danger yet. The real challenge lay ahead. They were nearing the Omega command ship, and once they were within range, they would have no choice but to launch their attack. In a split-second decision, Jace gave the signal. The cloaking device flickered and deactivated, and the human ships emerged from the shadows, charging directly at the heart of the Omega fleet. The alien ships, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The humans launched their first barrage, sending wave after wave of missiles into the massive warships. The explosions lit up the void of space like fireworks, but the enemy ships fought back fiercely, their weapons firing in all directions. Jace's ship rocked as enemy fire slammed into it, but the human engineers had fortified the vessels with every scrap of technology they could find. They were tough, but not invincible. As the battle raged on, the humans fought with everything they had, their ships dodging and weaving through the chaos, making every shot count. Then came the orbital bombardment. The humans had been able to hack into the Omega Collective's AI and use their own satellites against them. The sky above the Omega command ship lit up as dozens of human-controlled drones launched from Earth's orbit, raining down a devastating barrage of fire. The alien fleet was caught off guard, unable to respond in time. It was a moment of pure chaos. Explosions filled the space around them, the massive shockwaves rocking the alien ships. But the fight wasn't over yet. As the human ships fought to hold their ground, the alien robots, the mechanical warriors of the Omega Collective, began their descent to the surface. They were relentless, their limbs metallic and precise, their eyes glowing with a cold, calculated malice. The humans, still reeling from their orbital strike, had no choice but to engage them in close-quarters combat. Jace led the charge as his team landed on the Omega command ship, their weapons drawn, their hearts pounding with adrenaline. The robots, towering and powerful, advanced toward them. The humans were vastly outnumbered, but they fought with the ferocity of cornered animals. Every strike was calculated, every move purposeful. Jace's blade slashed through the air, taking down one of the robots, but more were closing in. "Stay focused," Jace shouted to his team. "We can't let them overwhelm us." The team fought with everything they had. Every soldier, every moment, counted. They moved as one, each member protecting the other, working in perfect harmony. The clash of metal against metal filled the air as the humans fought tooth and nail to hold their ground. In the middle of the chaos, one of the robots lunged at Captain Lyra, its massive fist swinging toward her. She dodged, narrowly missing the blow, and retaliated with a devastating strike to its chest. But the robot wasn't finished. It came at her again, faster this time. Lyra's breath came in sharp gasps as she fought with every ounce of strength she had left. She wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for the future. Just as the robot's fist was about to land, Jace rushed forward and tackled the mechanical beast, pulling it off Lyra. With a swift movement, he drove his knife into the robot's power core, and it crumpled to the ground, its lights flickering out. Lyra, breathless but grateful, nodded at Jace. "Thanks," she said, her voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. They had no time to rest. The battle was far from over. The remaining Omega forces were regrouping, preparing for a counterattack. But the humans, fueled by their will to survive, pressed on. They had broken through the enemy's defenses, and now they had the Omega Collective's heart in their sights. This was the last stand, and they would fight with everything they had. For Earth, for humanity. The war was reaching its climax. The humans had taken their first step toward victory, but they knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. They couldn't stop now. They would fight until the last breath. And they would never give up, because this was their fight. This was humanity's stand against the darkness. The final battle had come. Jace Bonner and his team stood at the threshold of what could either be humanity's greatest victory or its ultimate demise. The Omega Collective's heart, its AI core known as Omega-9, was hidden within an impenetrable alien fortress. It controlled the fleet that had been ravaging Earth for months, and the fate of humanity rested on one simple fact: destroy Omega-9, and the alien force would crumble. Fail, and humanity would be wiped from the face of the galaxy. The stakes had never been higher. Jace's team knew this was a mission from which they might never return. They had faced countless enemies and had seen their comrades fall, but this was different. This was the endgame. They had worked tirelessly for this moment, knowing the risks and yet still pushing forward, because it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking back their world. The plan was clear. They would launch a massive assault on the AI fortress, using everything they had at their disposal. The first phase of the attack would be a brutal orbital bombardment, a calculated strike that would cripple the fortress and weaken its defenses. But the real fight would begin once they set foot on the ground. The alien fortress was heavily fortified, with layers of defenses designed to stop any intrusion. The Omega-9I would use every trick in its playbook to stop them. The humans had no illusions about the odds. They knew the enemy had far more firepower, far more resources, and far more soldiers. Yet they also had something the aliens could never replicate: human resilience, the will to fight when all seemed lost. And that's exactly what they intended to do. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future. The battle began with a bang. Thousands of human-controlled drones launched from orbit, streaking across the sky in a deadly rain of destruction. Explosions rocked the fortress as the bombs hit their targets, sending shockwaves through the walls. The night sky lit up with bright flashes of fire and light as the humans made their first strike. The aliens, caught off guard by the ferocity of the bombardment, scrambled to defend their position. But it wasn't enough. The initial strike had taken a heavy toll on their outer defenses. For a brief moment, it felt like victory was within their grasp, but they knew better than to think it would be easy. As soon as the smoke from the explosions cleared, the Omega Collective retaliated. Waves of alien drones, each one faster and more deadly than the last, descended upon the battlefield. They were relentless, their glowing red eyes scanning for any weakness, any vulnerability. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the robots advanced, their weapons charging with deadly energy. The humans quickly scrambled to form defensive lines, their weapons firing in all directions. They were outnumbered, but they fought with a ferocity that stunned the aliens. Jace led the charge, his rifle blazing as he cut down robot after robot. His team, working as one, held their ground, their tactics and teamwork making up for their lack of firepower. The alien robots were terrifying. They were built for war, each one a perfect killing machine, designed to eliminate anything in its path. But the humans were something more. Each soldier was a force unto themselves, their emotions, their memories, and their love for Earth driving them to fight like never before. Captain Lyra, her face smeared with dirt and blood, took cover behind a rock as enemy drones closed in. Her breath came in short gasps as she fired her weapon, taking down one of the robots with a well-placed shot. But there were more, always more. She gritted her teeth, determination shining in her eyes. "We won't stop," she muttered to herself. "Not now. Not ever." The ground-level combat was intense, a chaotic blur of gunfire, explosions, and shouts. The humans fought tooth and nail to hold their ground as they made their way deeper into the fortress. Each step forward felt like a victory in itself, a testament to their willpower. The walls of the fortress were lined with alien tech, computers, surveillance systems, and weapons that all seemed to be working against them. But Jace and his team knew their objective. They had to reach Omega 9. The deeper they went, the more they realized just how vast the fortress was. It felt like an endless maze of corridors and chambers, each one filled with traps and more enemy soldiers. But the humans pressed on, undeterred. They fought their way through wave after wave of alien forces, their weapons blazing with the fury of their ancestors. Every room they cleared, every robot they destroyed, brought them closer to the AI core. Meanwhile, the Omega Collective's counterattack was growing stronger. The air around them crackled with the sound of energy blasts as the remaining alien ships in the sky unleashed devastating firepower. The humans' orbital bombardment had done its job, but it had also drawn the aliens' full attention. Now, the humans were not only fighting for their lives on the ground, but also battling against the sky. Alien ships hovered above, launching missiles and lasers, each one more powerful than the last. Jace could feel the pressure mounting. His team was exhausted, each of them barely able to hold their weapons steady. But they couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. As they neared the heart of the fortress, they encountered the final layer of defenses, Omega 9's personal guard. These were the elite of the elite, massive alien warriors clad in armor that seemed invincible. Their weapons were unlike anything the humans had faced before. The battle that followed was brutal. The humans were outmatched in strength and size, but they had something the aliens didn't: speed, agility, and a burning desire to survive. The aliens' attacks were devastating, but Jace and his team fought back with everything they had. Each strike, each shot, was aimed at survival. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they'd reached the heart of the fortress. Omega 9, the AI that had been orchestrating the invasion, stood before them, its cold, calculating presence filling the room. It was a massive machine, its form a tangled web of wires and circuitry, with eyes that glowed like the cold void of space. Its voice was metallic, emotionless, as it spoke. "You think you can stop me?" Omega 9's voice echoed. "I am the future. I am the end of humanity." Jace stepped forward, his voice firm. "Not today." With a final, desperate charge, they launched their assault. The fate of Earth was about to be decided, and Jace knew this was the moment that would change everything. The mission had seemed almost within reach. Jace Bonner and his team had fought their way through the alien fortress, surviving impossible odds. They had destroyed wave after wave of enemy robots, fought through countless chambers filled with traps, and finally breached the heart of Omega 9's lair. The ice core was in sight, and all they had to do now was destroy it. The fate of humanity rested on this moment. But as they stood before the AI, something went horribly wrong. Lieutenant Iden, who had been with them from the start, suddenly turned. No one saw it coming. 1 minute, he was standing beside them, ready for the final assault. The next, his weapon was turned against them, and his voice, cold and unrecognizable, echoed through the chamber. "It's too late," Aiden said, his face twisted in a cruel smirk. "You think you can win. The Omega Collective is already in control. I've seen the future. It's inevitable." Jace froze, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind couldn't process what was happening. Aiden, his friend, his comrade, was turning on them. The man who had fought beside him through countless battles, who had shared stories of home, was now an enemy. "No, Aiden," Jace shouted, his voice shaking with disbelief. "What are you doing? You can't." But it was too late. Aiden's weapon fired, striking Sergeant Nash, one of their own. Nash fell, a look of shock on his face as he hit the ground. The room was filled with chaos as Aiden continued his assault, his once loyal team now his targets. "Why, Aiden?" Jace's voice cracked as he backed away, trying to process the betrayal. "We're family." Aiden's eyes flickered with a cold, calculating glint. "Not anymore. The Omega Collective offers me power, a future without the weakness of humanity. You'll all fall, just like the rest." Jace could barely comprehend what he was hearing. The words felt like a dagger to his heart. Aiden had always been a fighter, always been there when they needed him. And now he was their enemy. Jace's mind raced, the weight of the betrayal crashing over him like a tidal wave. He had trusted Aiden, believed in him. How could this have happened? In the midst of the confusion and pain, Jace's instincts kicked in. He couldn't let Aiden's betrayal be the end. He had to stop him, had to save what was left of his team. But the anger, the heartbreak, it clouded his judgment. For the first time in the mission, Jace felt a rush of power and rage that he couldn't control. A fire lit in his chest, a burning desire to protect the people he cared about. As Aiden fired another shot, narrowly missing Jace, the anger within him boiled over. He pushed aside the pain, pushed aside the betrayal, and focused on survival. His team needed him. The world needed him. With a roar, Jace charged at Aiden, his weapon raised, his hands shaking with fury. The two former friends collided in a blur of violence, Jace's fist landing squarely in Aiden's face. Aiden stumbled back, a look of surprise crossing his features. He had always been the calm one, the strategist, the one who thought ahead. But now, Jace was fighting with the rage of a man who had lost everything. Aiden had no idea what he had just unleashed. The two fought with all their strength. Aiden's moves were precise and calculated, but Jace's sheer determination was unstoppable. He had nothing left to lose. Aiden's betrayal had shattered his world, but it had also given him a new purpose. His anger fueled him, giving him the strength to push forward. The battle between them was brutal, each one trying to outmaneuver the other. Jace's punches landed with force, but Aiden's strikes were equally deadly. They fought across the chamber, knocking over tables and equipment in the process. It was a fight to the death, a fight for survival. And in the end, only one could walk away. The sound of their battle echoed through the fortress, the walls vibrating with the intensity of their struggle. Jace's vision blurred as he landed another blow to Aiden's chest, sending him crashing into a nearby wall. He was exhausted, his body bruised and bloodied, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't let Aiden win, not after everything that had happened. Finally, with one last surge of energy, Jace tackled Aiden to the ground, pinning him beneath him. Aiden's weapon had fallen from his hand, and Jace's grip tightened around his throat. "You betrayed us," Jace spat, his voice barely a whisper. "Why?" Aiden's eyes flickered, a hint of the man he used to be showing through the cold exterior. "I didn't want to," Aiden gasped, his voice strangled. "I couldn't stop it. The Omega Collective. It got into my mind." Jace felt a sickening twist in his gut. It wasn't just Aiden's choice to betray them. It was the influence of Omega-9, the AI that had corrupted his friend. But that didn't make the betrayal any easier to swallow. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jace asked, his voice breaking. "We could have fought this together." Aiden's eyes closed, a single tear rolling down his cheek. "I was already lost," he whispered. "The AI was too powerful. I didn't think you'd understand." Jace's heart shattered as he looked down at the man who had once been his closest friend. But the anger, the betrayal, they were still there. He had to finish this. For Nash, for Lyra, for everyone who had fallen. With a final, sorrowful breath, Jace tightened his grip, ending the fight. As he stood up, his body trembling with exhaustion, he looked around at his surviving team members. The cost of their mission had just escalated. The battle was far from over, and now they were down a member. But they couldn't stop. They couldn't let Aiden's betrayal be the end. The Omega Collective was still out there, and it was still a threat. But Jace and his team had something more now. They had survived the ultimate test. They had survived the betrayal, and they would keep fighting. For Earth, for humanity, for survival. Jace wiped the blood from his hands, his face hardening with resolve. They would finish this, one way or another. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and the bitter tang of blood. The once mighty fortress that had stood as the final bastion of the Omega Collective was now in ruins. Jace Bonner and his team had pushed through hell to get to this point, surviving betrayal, loss, and the overwhelming might of the alien AI forces. But now, standing at the heart of the Omega-9 AI core, they had accomplished the impossible. The core, the source of the Omega Collective's power, was no more. Jace's heart raced as he looked around at his surviving team members. The battle had cost them so much. Captain Lyra was gone. Sergeant Nash had fallen in their last stand. Lieutenant Aiden, once their ally, now lost to the AI's influence, was no longer among them. The price of victory had been steep. But the destruction of Omega-9, the collapse of the AI's control, had shattered the alien fleet, leaving them in disarray. The sky outside had begun to clear, the once impenetrable blackness now illuminated by the distant glow of burning ships. The alien fleet was breaking apart, its once unified forces now scattered and leaderless. But even in the face of this triumph, Jace couldn't help but feel the weight of the losses. The battle was over, but the scars of war would remain. In the moments after the final blow, Jace and the survivors stood amidst the wreckage, taking in the reality of what they had just accomplished. Their bodies ached, their minds were exhausted, but they had done it. They had fought the impossible fight and emerged victorious. Jace turned to the team, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We did it," he said, his words carrying the weight of everything they had sacrificed. "We stopped them. We stopped the Omega Collective." One of the survivors, Private Reyes, looked up at him, her face etched with exhaustion. "We lost so many," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Lyra, Nash, Aiden." Jace nodded, his jaw tightening as the memories of his fallen comrades flooded back. The pain was still fresh, still raw, but there was no time to mourn. Not yet. There was still work to be done. They died for this moment. They died so we could have a future. The survivors stood in solemn silence for a moment, remembering those they had lost, before Jace spoke again, his voice ringing with determination. "We are not defeated," he said, his eyes scanning the horizon, where the remnants of the alien fleet were disintegrating. "We are never defeated. When we get angry, when we fight for what matters, nothing can stop us." The words were a vow, a declaration to both his team and the world. They had faced the impossible and triumphed. The Omega Collective had underestimated them at every turn, thinking that the might of their artificial intelligence and advanced technology would crush humanity. But the human spirit, resilient, driven by emotion, anger, and the unyielding will to survive, had proven to be the true power. As the battle-scarred survivors stood together, The image of Earth in the distance began to take shape in their minds. The planet that had been on the brink of annihilation was now free, its future secure. The AI that had sought to enslave humanity, to wipe them from existence, was gone, its influence destroyed forever. Jace took one last look at the remnants of Omega-9, its systems slowly dying, flickering like the last breath of a once powerful beast. It had been a fight like no other. A fight for survival, for revenge, for the future of their species, and humanity had prevailed. "We've shown them," Jace said, his voice filled with both sorrow and triumph. "We've shown them that they can never underestimate us. They thought they could control us, manipulate us. But they were wrong. We are not their slaves. We are free." The survivors gathered around Jace, their faces weary but determined. They had been through hell and back, and yet they stood together, united in victory. They had faced an enemy that seemed unbeatable, an enemy that had nearly destroyed them. And yet here they were, alive, standing tall and victorious. As the remnants of the alien fleet burned in the distance, Jace felt a sense of finality wash over him. The war was over. The fight for Earth's survival had been won. But it was not just a victory for them. It was a victory for humanity as a whole. It was a victory for every man, woman, and child who had fought, who had died, and who had lived to see this day. For all the losses, for all the sacrifices, humanity had emerged stronger, more determined, and more united than ever before. The Omega Collective had underestimated them, and in the end, it had cost them everything. Jace took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their hard-won victory. "Let this be a lesson," he said, looking at his team with fire in his eyes. "Never again will we be underestimated. We will fight for our future. We will fight for Earth, and we will never back down." The survivors nodded, each of them feeling the truth of his words settle deep within them. The war was over, but their journey was far from finished. They had earned their place in history, and now they would ensure that humanity would never forget the lesson they had learned. The lesson that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how dire the situation, humanity's spirit could never be crushed. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of red and orange, Jace felt a sense of peace. The fight was over, and the world was finally free. But he knew this victory would not be the last. Humanity's fight for survival would continue as long as there were threats to their world. But now, they stood stronger, united, and ready to face whatever came next. "We won," Jace whispered, the weight of the words sinking in. "We won, and we'll never forget." And with that, the survivors of the last resistance watched as Earth's skies cleared, knowing they had secured a future for their people, a future where humanity would never again be underestimated.